simple little group. Okay? 5 minutes? No, it's more than enough. I'm about done now. So, but it connects us in every different way imaginable. We can connect our local communities, we can connect on water issues, on building issues, we can invest in what we want to invest in and direct, and stop paying things we don't want to pay as a group or together. So if anybody's willing to talk to me about this afterwards, and if anybody likes what I had to say, and I got a little bit more which I can't tell, there's further plans going on, and I'd love to tell you them, but maybe in the end of the month or something like that we'll get something out to you from Ireland. But and this is another thing, guys. I was a strong Republican. I was never involved, but I would have been strong Republican. I was away from Ireland all my life, and I remember years ago, I was as an Irishman, I was a bit of a mad drinker, and I swore to God I would never ever set foot in England because I'd be arrested in 24 hours. That was because as an Irishman I wouldn't take any guff off anybody, and I like drinking in the pub, so that was going to happen eventually. If it was 24 hours, it would have been the next day. I have a habit of not backing down. So here I'm facing my worst fear. I'd rather go out and fight the lot of you than talk on a microphone about this, but I'm doing it anyway. So this is my fight for you guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. You're not that mad, actually. I've definitely met madder. Anybody here madder than him? No? Yeah, I thought so. I wasn't going to say anything, though. Okay, our next talker also happens to be organising this thing. Is that right? Yeah? Oh, what? Just policing it, I think. Yeah. Yeah, so he gets to choose how long the speakers get, and he's on next.
You said he wanted 5 minutes.
No, I know, I'm just kidding. How long do you want? He's going for the full half an hour, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to be talking to you about Bitcoin. Will you be selling them after the show?
Well, that depends on the price.
Okay. How much is the Bitcoin worth today?
I checked. I spent a lot of time, about $120. Yeah. So this is a talk entitled "Bitcoin for Beginners." I could give you the technicalities of the system all day and still not be done after a couple of hours. But so okay, you guys, you've heard of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Has anyone here not heard of Bitcoin? You've not heard of Bitcoin? Is this just because you want me to explain it on camera? Okay, fair enough. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the features of it, just describe it rather than getting into the technicalities of how it works. Then I'm going to talk in a very, very, very loose and allegorical way about how it actually works. And then a bit of why you should actually care. And then, I mean, there's been a bit of discussion already about Bitcoin with a couple of other speakers so far, so at that point I'd be quite interested in hearing what you guys think, and whether you think it's the future of currency or a good answer to there being 150 people locked in a house up the hill there talking about the world and finance. I don't know. So, Bitcoin. First and most important thing is that it's a digital currency. You could print it if you wanted to, but the value of the thing itself relies entirely on digital data, best represented in a computer, oddly enough. The critical feature, probably a lot of you guys like this because of this, is that it's decentralized. There is no bank of Bitcoin. There's one guy called Satoshi Nakamoto, that's a pseudonym, it's not a real person, who notionally came up with the idea. He published a paper in 2008 describing a system of decentralized digital currency. He doesn't control it, he just wrote a paper. Maybe he owns lots of Bitcoins, maybe he knows lots of key people, but ultimately it's a decentralized system. You guys can run the Bitcoin software on your computer, mine Bitcoins, trade Bitcoins, and you don't need to go through a bank or any other authority figure to get that to happen. Like printed money that we use nowadays, Bitcoin has no intrinsic value itself. There is, however, a limited amount of it, which makes it a little bit like gold in terms of why people value it, why people trade it, because it's rare, because other people place value on it as well. Unlike traditional currency, and why Bitcoin has taken a long time to get off the ground, it does not have the approval of the government. The government does not say in any country that you must pay your taxes in Bitcoin. So its value is determined solely by the fact that you can go onto the internet and go to an exchange, take your hard-earned US dollars, or indeed any other currency you like now, and trade that for Bitcoin at a certain price. As Danny mentioned at the beginning, he was interested in knowing what the Bitcoin is currently trading at, about $120. Though that figure has gone from zero in 2008 to a dizzying height of $250 a couple of months ago, to now it's sort of steadying around 120. So it has value because people are willing to pay for it, and that's the key to any kind of currency like this. And for me, I suppose the best feature about it, and the reasons why it's being adopted by a lot of people on the internet, are because you can move Bitcoin anywhere with an internet connection within 30 minutes, reliably anyway. It's the transactions are very low cost, and 30 minutes, compare that to shipping gold around the world, is very, very, very quick. Someone mentioned gold before, and how many of you guys own gold? How many of you pull it out of your pockets when you're walking down the street to buy groceries? How many of you order on Amazon using gold? Yeah, interesting question. So how does it work? Well, I thought long and hard about this, and the best analogy I can come up with it is that it's a bit like email, in the sense that everyone has an email address, or in the case of Charlie Skelton, you run about 3 websites and have about 15 email addresses. The same is essentially true with Bitcoin. Instead of an address, you have what's called a wallet, which is an account essentially, which has a certain amount of Bitcoin in it. There are computers on the internet, servers, whose job it is to make transactions between Bitcoin accounts happen, much in the same way that computers pass email from one email address to another, backwards and forwards, and so on and so forth. But this is managed by an open source piece of software which implements Bitcoin, which is a protocol. It just describes the way to send this data backwards and forwards. You can run Bitcoin on your own computer. If you've brought a computer with you, I can give you the software afterwards and get you running it if you really want to. And this software is just responsible for passing transactions that happen. Every single Bitcoin client, so every single computer running Bitcoin, will have a database of every single transaction that has ever occurred in Bitcoin as well. That's an interesting fact to bear in mind. Someone mentioned earlier that this is an anonymous currency. To some extent, yes, it's pseudo-anonymous at least. But when you think about the fact that every computer stores a copy of every single transaction in Bitcoin that's ever happened, assuming you can identify the owner of one particular account at any point, you can then look forwards and backwards at the transactions that have happened with their account and where that money came from, and so on and so forth. It's also important to point out you can create as many accounts as you like. There's of course you don't tie that to your personal data when you create an account, so that's one way to make the system more anonymous for you. Whenever you're receiving or whenever you're spending Bitcoin, create a new address, and optionally in between transfer Bitcoin between those addresses and accounts. There's one really obvious thing I've missed here, which is where the hell did Bitcoin stuff, where did the value come from in the first place? So I've talked about the system that sends numbers backwards and forwards between accounts. Essentially, it's an interesting quirk of the system. So when the computers that are processing Bitcoin transactions, when they summarize all that information, they've done it in a way that makes it really quite difficult to compute. And so when your computer is calculating this, you're essentially entering into a lottery with every other computer on the internet that's currently processing Bitcoin transactions. And if you come up with the magical solution, if you are the lottery winner, you get to add on an extra transaction to that list saying, and I award myself 25 Bitcoin at the moment. Yeah, that's a very basic summary of how it works. I'm not going to talk anything more technical than that here because that'll confuse you probably, and if you'd like to talk about it, you can talk about it afterwards. Why might you care? Well, number one, it's unregulated. That means that the Cypriot government will take 7% of your Bitcoin as a short-term solution to their debt problems. It means the people who are stationed in the hotel up there can't print more Bitcoin for themselves. If you disagree with the concepts of quantitative easing and the fact that the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve in America are controlled by private banks, then perhaps Bitcoin is the answer for you here. As I've said, it's anonymous to a degree. As soon as you create a trail when you're buying a product or service, or when you're taking money and trading it into Bitcoin, if that is tied to your personal data, then of course somebody has information that can connect your Bitcoin, one of your Bitcoin addresses, to your name and your address, whatever. However, you're more than welcome to trade in Bitcoin without ever giving away any of that data. What can you do with it at the moment? Well, of course you can transfer it to and from cash as long as you can find a willing buyer. There are a number of online exchanges where you can do that. You can buy digital goods, which is probably one of the better uses for a currency like this, because digital goods, of course, are transferred over the internet, and you don't need to necessarily have as much trust in the other person that you're dealing with, because the transaction is instant. You can buy a house. There's a guy in Germany who listed, it's not quite a house, it's a derelict old property on a farm somewhere. He's put that up for auction on one of the Bitcoin forums. So if any of you are looking for property in a rural town in Germany, you can buy pizza with it. Famously, one of the earlier guys who mined lots of Bitcoin, because he had so much of it and it wasn't worth very much at the time, he said, okay, right, I'm bored of this. I have 10,000 Bitcoin, and if someone can deliver me 2 pizzas, that would be great. Thank you. You can have those. I saw an interview with this guy, because at the moment that amount would be worth about $1 million. And the guy, he doesn't kick himself for that. He says that was an investment in the future of Bitcoin. This is allegedly the first transaction for a real-world product that ever happened in Bitcoin. And he said that, of course, he's still got more than that 10,000. He said this is a necessary step in proving that this is a real thing, that this is a real currency, and that other people might not be crazy if they try and use it. And I don't know whether this is, according to you, the best use of this. Greg Sams mentioned Silk Road, which is an auction site that auctions all the things you can't sell on eBay, mostly anyway. So you can buy drugs on that website. You can only access it using Tor, which is a system for making your internet access anonymous, and you can only bid for things in it in Bitcoin. So it's a fascinating system. So you pay in Bitcoin, and your drugs come in the post. And theoretically, that money is untraceable in the eyes of the people who might arrest those people. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit more about the history. So 2008, so this is a relatively new thing. I think that's when I heard about it. This is when Satoshi Nakamoto, again, just a pseudonym, publishes a paper about how this will work. In 2010, he vanishes. He says, right guys, I'm out of here, and never been heard from again. Or maybe he has, we don't know, because we have no idea who this guy is. In 2011, a Bitcoin could be sold for about $1 on one of these exchanges, but throughout the year it rose to what seemed at the time like a dizzying peak of $30, and then crashed down again. By the end of the year or so, it was trading at about $15 for Bitcoin. And this year, of course, the Cyprus scandal, skimming money off people's bank accounts, reached a peak of $250. That was probably an investment bubble. I wouldn't buy Bitcoin because you think it's an investment. I'd buy it because you think it's a useful thing to have and do something within your life. And loads of media coverage around that time as well. So even things as well renowned and as mainstream and boring as the Financial Times covered Bitcoin, The Economist. So that's big time media from the establishment, if you like, who are covering Bitcoin. Does anyone here own Bitcoin? Somebody must. I've seen people there's a guy with a Satoshi Nakamoto t-shirt on, who's obviously somewhere over there. You own Bitcoin? Why do you own Bitcoin? Where did you get them?
I don't feel comfortable with telling.
Okay, you're not comfortable with telling us. That's interesting. Could you tell us why you don't feel comfortable?
Silk Road.
Sorry?
From Silk Road.
Who, what, sorry?
Silk Road.
From Silk Road?
For Silk Road.
For Silk, okay, that's right, okay. Have you enjoyed your experiences on the Silk Road auctioning website?
I have friends that have, but I haven't enjoyed it.
So you didn't get what you ordered?
I haven't ordered anything yet.
Ah, okay. So the rest of you have heard about Bitcoin, mostly?
Read about it.
I've got a question for you. Who sets the limit? If you say there's no regulation, who sets the limit on the number of coins that can be produced?
So the question was, who sets the limit on the number of Bitcoins that can be produced if this isn't a system with an authority? It's an agreement by all the people who run the software. The software has a built-in limit of 21,000 coins, a limit that will be reached in the year 2140. 2140. So yeah, in the future, all of these people who run the Bitcoin software could decide that. No problem. could decide they want to double that number, whatever. It wouldn't be in their interests to do so, though, because they'd be devaluing the Bitcoin.
So it's by consensus then, yeah?
Sorry?
It's by consensus.
It's by consensus, but instead of one vote per person, as we allegedly have in a democracy, it's based on the amount of computing power that you contribute to the network. It's directly proportional to that.
Right.
So it's not a system limited by a reserve, it's not a system limited by the rarity of a metal, it's not a system limited by a government, it's limited by computing power and the consensus of people who hold computing power. And you guys...
Okay, so how would I compete with a company like Apple or Microsoft who've got tons of computing power and loads of skills as a one man?
How do you compete with these things, with large companies that have huge numbers of computers? So interestingly, there are people who have invested time in... So if you go home and install Bitcoin on your computer and try to mine Bitcoin, you're not going to do very well, because you need specific types of CPUs, specific types of processors that can do the relevant calculations very quickly. And it turns out now that the CPU in your computer will be rubbish in comparison probably to the processor that sits on the graphics card in your computer, which again is dwarfed by people who have created, who are using things called field programmable gate arrays, FPGAs, where it's essentially a dedicated chip for that purpose. And people have produced another level called ASICs. I've forgotten what that exactly stands for, but application-specific integrated circuit, which is thousands, if not millions, of times more efficient at calculating the stuff that goes into processing Bitcoin than your home computer's processor.
Sure.
So, and this, creating computer chips is per chip a very cheap process. These things are on the market now. Of course, there are some people making quite a lot of money selling them, but they are accessible to the average person and not just to large corporations.
Okay.
So Google have plenty of computers with CPUs, and they have large GPU farms as well. But compared to ASICs, no. Of course, that's an interesting question. What happens if someone amasses a lot of money, buys a whole load of ASICs, and then drives things in another direction? They are. That's called the 51% attack, because in order to rewrite Bitcoin transaction history, you have to control 51% or more of the computing power that's going into the network at any one time.
Or the currency. If there's a ceiling of 21,000 coins, and you've got 11,000 coins. Okay.
Okay. So you can't. So your question is, if I have more money than you, can I change the network?
I see. I like the idea, and I see there's I can see a lot of potential in it. But I'm trying to look at how this levels it for mass population, or doesn't it do that? Is it just a game for techies to sort of jump on board, make a few bob, and then buck out of it?
I don't know. So the question was, is this just a way for techies to make some money and then disappear after getting everyone's interest up?
Well, the thing is, if you're creating a currency, even a digital currency, the idea presumably is to proliferate that so that everybody can participate. Yes?
Yep.
If you've got a laptop, you can participate. You may only be creating a millionth of a Bitcoin, I'm guessing here, I don't know. But if you're creating, say, a millionth of a Bitcoin, per month, well, obviously you're not going to get very far, are you? Right? Okay. Whereas if you've got this ASICs and all the other computing, you might be able to make 2 or 3 Bitcoins. Now, you've said a Bitcoin is worth $120, right? So realistically, for an average salary here, for me to dedicate my time to that, I would need to make 1 Bitcoin a day minimum, 7 days a week. Yeah. Now, what computing power would I or any other member of the public need to be able to arrive at that? And as there's only a limit, if I'm only making 1 Bitcoin a day, right? Okay, that's 365 Bitcoins a year. So I've got, that would be my annual salary now. It would be 365 Bitcoins a year, as opposed to, say, the national average of 25 grand. Yeah. Give or take. All right, you're following me,
so
yeah?
You want to know how you do that?
Yes.
Okay, if you would like to make 1 Bitcoin a day, you have to get your hands on one of these ASICs.
Okay.
And that will work for you only in the short term. So ASIC is the chip that will do these calculations much more quickly, and you'll probably be making a couple of Bitcoins a day at the moment. The trouble is that the way new Bitcoin is allocated to new users, as I said before, it's a lottery. So it's not based on the total amount of computing power you put in. It's based on that relative to how much computing power there is in the network in total. So you get more votes by doing that, but if other people are running ASICs as well, have lots of computing power invested in the network, then they get more votes as well, if you see what I mean. Because it's a lottery.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks. Appreciate that.
So if you've got your hands on an ASIC, and they're really hard to get your hands on at the moment because of course everyone wants them, if you get one anytime soon, it'll just become more difficult over time as other people get their hands on them.
Understood.
Right.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hello.